The tremor started in Dr. Rebecca Sterling's left hand first, just a barely perceptible quiver as she reached for her coffee cup during the morning briefing at Blackstone Defense Analytics. The fluorescent lights in conference room C cast harsh shadows across the polished granite table where 12 senior executives sat reviewing quarterly weapons testing reports. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Denver headquarters, the Rocky Mountains stretched endlessly under a crisp October sky, their snow-capped peaks gleaming like knife edges in the morning sun. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Rebecca tucked her hand beneath the table, hoping no one had noticed. The neurologist had called it essential tremor, a benign condition that affected millions of people. Stress made it worse, and presenting ballistics analysis to a room full of skeptical defense contractors definitely qualified as stressful. She'd been the lead weapons testing analyst at Blackstone for 3 years, but the executives still treated her like an intern who'd wandered into the wrong meeting. As you can see from slide 12, Rebecca continued, clicking her wireless presenter with her steady right hand, the M110A1 rifle system shows significant accuracy degradation beyond 1,500 meters. Our field tests indicate a 23% drop in first-round hit probability compared to manufacturer specifications. General Morrison Blackwell, Blackstone's CEO and a man who commanded rooms like he'd once commanded battalions, barely glanced at her presentation screen. His steel-gray eyes were focused on the weapons testing facility visible through the conference room windows, where technicians were setting up targets on the outdoor range. The distant crack of rifle fire echoed across the valley as military contractors tested new prototypes. "Miss Sterling," Blackwell interrupted, his voice carrying the authoritative tone of someone accustomed to instant obedience. "While I'm sure your computer models have their place, we're more interested in real-world performance data. Our overseas clients aren't buying spreadsheets." Rebecca felt the familiar frustration of being marginalized, but she pressed on. "Sir, with respect, these aren't computer models. These are actual field test results from qualified marksmen using production weapons. The accuracy issues become critical when we're talking about long-range precision shots that could mean the difference between mission success and that's enough," snapped Victoria Ashford, Blackstone's chief financial officer. A sharp-faced woman in her 50s who looked like she could balance budgets in her sleep, Victoria had little patience for technical details that didn't directly impact profit margins. "We didn't bring you here to lecture us about theoretical accuracy problems. Our clients are satisfied with the current performance specifications." Rebecca closed her laptop with more force than necessary, her left hand trembling slightly as she reached for her water bottle. 3 years of weapons analysis experience and a PhD in ballistics engineering from MIT, yet they still treated her recommendations like suggestions from a first-year intern. She gazed out at the testing range where she could see a sniper team preparing for long-range trials. The lead marksman was making adjustments to his scope, his movements precise and methodical. Rebecca knew that rifle. It was a custom-built .338 Lapua Magnum, probably capable of accurate shots out to 2,000 meters in the right hands. She could tell from the scope's positioning and the shooter's stance that he was competent, but not exceptional. His grip was slightly too tight, his breathing pattern wasn't optimized for the altitude, and he was fighting the wind instead of reading it properly. Her own military training had been brief but intensive, 6 months with the Army Marksmanship Unit before a training accident had ended her competitive shooting career and left her with the tremor that now plagued her left hand. "Fascinating setup they have out there," came a voice beside her. Rebecca turned to find Dr. Marcus Fleming standing near her chair. The elderly ballistics engineer was Blackstone's head of research and development, responsible for testing the advanced weapon systems that American forces relied on overseas. Unlike the other executives, Fleming actually seemed to notice when Rebecca spoke during meetings. Barrett M82, A1 with a Leupold Mark IV scope, Rebecca replied automatically. Probably zeroed at 1,000 meters. Though the ballistic coefficient suggests they should be compensating more for elevation at this altitude. Fleming's eyebrows rose with interest. You know about long-range shooting? I used to compete, Rebecca said simply. Army marksmanship unit before I transitioned to engineering. Fleming studied her with new curiosity. Really? What was your specialty? Precision rifle. Some experience with extreme long-range work, up to 2,500 meters under ideal conditions. The conversation might have continued, but Fleming glanced around. The boardroom where the other executives were deep and animated. Discussion about international sales contracts and overseas shipping logistics. He moved closer, lowering his voice to barely above a whisper. Rebecca, may I ask you something in confidence? Something in Fleming's tone made Rebecca pay attention. The elderly scientist's normally calm demeanor had shifted to something more urgent, almost worried. Of course, Dr. Fleming. Fleming pulled out his phone and showed Rebecca a series of encrypted files displaying weapons test data. These are accuracy reports from our latest rifle systems. According to our internal database, these weapons are performing at or above manufacturer specifications for precision shooting at extended ranges. Rebecca looked at the data, her technical background allowing her to understand the ballistics information immediately. The numbers showed exceptional accuracy, with sub-AMOA groups at distances exceeding 1,800 meters. These look like excellent results. What's the problem? Fleming's expression darkened. The problem is that these test results are completely fabricated. The actual performance data shows dramatic accuracy degradation beyond 1,200 meters. Weapons that should be capable of precision shots at extreme range are missing targets by margins that could get soldiers killed in the field. Rebecca felt her stomach drop as the implications became clear. You're saying Blackstone is knowingly shipping substandard weapons to military units? I'm saying someone inside this company is falsifying test data to hide the fact that our weapon systems don't meet the specifications we're claiming. And I think they're using the computer systems to cover their tracks. Fleming's voice dropped even lower. Snipers in Afghanistan and Iraq are missing critical shots because their weapons aren't performing as advertised. The enemy is escaping. Missions are failing, and American soldiers are dying because they can't trust their equipment. Before Rebecca could respond, the lights in the conference room flickered momentarily, followed by the distinct sound of the building's security alarm. Not the short chirps of a routine drill, but the sustained wail of an actual emergency. General Blackwell looked up from his papers with annoyance. What's that about? Rebecca was already moving toward the windows, her engineering instincts kicking in. Through the glass, she could see smoke rising from the lower levels of the Blackstone building, and emergency vehicles were racing up the mountain access road from multiple directions. That's the building's emergency evacuation signal, she said, studying the scene below. They were on the 10th floor of the facility, and she could see that the smoke was coming from the research and development section where all of Blackstone's most sensitive weapons testing data was stored. Dr. Fleming, she said urgently, turning back to the elderly scientist. Do you have copies of that weapons data? Fleming patted a leather briefcase chained to his wrist. Everything's in here. Test results, internal communications, financial records showing the cover-up. Enough evidence to expose this entire conspiracy and save the lives of soldiers who are currently carrying weapons they can't trust. The building shuddered beneath their feet, a deep vibration that spoke of structural damage somewhere below. Rebecca's military training had taught her to recognize the signs of explosive failure, and every instinct was screaming that they were in immediate danger. We need to evacuate immediately, she said firmly, but General Blackwell was still looking out the window dismissively. It's probably just a small fire in one of the testing labs, he he said with the confidence of someone who'd never been wrong about anything important. These buildings have excellent fire suppression systems and emergency protocols. Rebecca's phone buzzed with an emergency alert. Blackstone Defense Facility under attack. Multiple explosions reported. Evacuate immediately. The word attack changed everything. Rebecca turned to the room full of executives, her voice cutting through their confused chatter. Ladies and gentlemen, this building is under attack. We need to reach the emergency stairwells immediately. Victoria. Ashford laughed dismissively. Attack? Miss Sterling, I think you're being a bit dramatic. This is probably just some malfunction in the testing labs. The conference room exploded. Rebecca felt herself thrown across the room as the windows shattered inward, glass and debris filling the air like a deadly blizzard. The screaming of twisted steel mixed with human screams of terror as the building's structure groaned under the impact of whatever had just hit them. When the smoke cleared, Rebecca found herself behind an overturned conference table, her ears ringing and her head spinning. Blood trickled from a cut on her forehead, but she was conscious and mobile. Her left hand was trembling more violently. Now the adrenaline and shock amplifying the essential tremor that had already been troubling her. But her right hand remained steady, and her mind was clear despite the chaos around her. "Dr. Fleming," she called out, pushing debris off her legs. "Here." Fleming's voice came from near the remains of the presentation screen. The elderly scientist was clutching his briefcase, but Rebecca could see blood on his shirt and a nasty gash across his left arm. Rebecca counted heads quickly. 12 people had been in the room when the explosion hit. She could see 8 moving. 4 weren't moving at all. General Blackwell was conscious but trapped under a fallen ceiling beam, his face pale with shock and pain. Victoria Ashford was sitting against a wall, staring at her hands with the 1,000-yard stare of someone whose world had just been violently disrupted. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Rebecca pulled out her phone, grateful to find it still functional despite the debris. She dialed 911, but got a busy signal. She tried again, same result. "Cell towers must be overloaded," she said to Fleming, who had made his way over to her. "Position." Moving to the shattered windows, Rebecca looked out at what remained of the view. What she saw made her heart sink. The building wasn't just damaged, it was dying. Smoke was pouring from multiple floors, and she could see structural damage extending throughout the facility's height. Emergency vehicles surrounded the building's base like toys, but they were maintaining a significant distance. Rebecca could see why debris was falling from the upper floors, making close approach impossible for rescue teams. But there, positioned on a distant ridgeline approximately 1,800 meters away, she could see something that made her pulse quicken. A counter-sniper team had set up an overwatch position, probably law enforcement tactical officers, establishing security around the incident scene. She could make out the distinctive profile of a precision rifle and scope, the marksman scanning the building through his optics. "I need to get to that sniper team," Rebecca said to Fleming. Fleming looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "Rebecca, we're 15 floors up in a damaged building. How exactly do you propose to reach a team that's nearly 2 kilometers away?" "The roof," Rebecca interrupted. "If I can reach the roof and establish communication with that Overwatch team, I might be able to coordinate a rescue operation." "You're talking about signaling to snipers who are positioned to provide security, not rescue operations," Fleming pointed out. "And even if you could reach them, this building could collapse at any moment." Rebecca looked around at the survivors, then back at the distant sniper position. "Dr. Fleming, what's the alternative? Wait for the building to collapse around us?" As if summoned by her words, the building shuddered again, more glass falling from the damaged windows. She could hear the groaning of stressed steel from somewhere deep in the building's structure, and the sound was getting worse. The stairwells might be blocked, Fleming said, though his voice carried more resignation than hope. Even if we could reach the roof, how would you communicate with a team that far away? Rebecca pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the number she needed. Despite everything that had happened, despite the tremor in her left hand that had ended her competitive shooting career, she still maintained contact with her old unit. She hit dial and waited. After 4 rings, a familiar voice answered. "Rebecca? Jesus, I've been watching the news about the Blackstone facility. Please tell me you're not in that building." "Captain Thompson, I'm in the building," Rebecca interrupted. "Fifth, 10th floor, 8 survivors plus myself. I need you to patch me through to the counter-sniper team that's set up on the eastern ridgeline." Captain David Thompson, her former team leader from the Army Marksmanship Unit and one of the finest precision shooters she'd ever known, didn't waste time with questions. "Stand by while I get you connected." While Rebecca waited for the connection, she moved around the room, checking on the other survivors. General Blackwell was conscious but in significant pain from the beam across his legs. Victoria Ashford seemed to be in shock, but wasn't seriously injured. 2 junior executives were helping a wounded security guard, while an elderly woman who'd been observing the board meeting sat quietly in a corner, remarkably calm despite the circumstances. Rebecca's phone crackled as the call transferred to the tactical frequency. "This is Sergeant Martinez, Denver SWAT counter-sniper. Who am I speaking to?" "Sergeant, this is Dr. Rebecca Sterling, former Army Marksmanship Unit. I'm trapped on the 5th, 10th floor of the Blackstone building with 8 civilian survivors. I need immediate communication with the incident command regarding evacuation." "Options. Dr. Sterling, I've been monitoring the situation. The building's structural integrity is severely compromised. We can't risk bringing aircraft close enough for roof extraction, and the stairwells are reporting significant damage on multiple floors." Rebecca studied the tactical situation through the shattered windows, her mind automatically calculating angles, distances, and environmental factors that others might miss. The wind was coming from the northwest at approximately 8 to 12 miles per hour, creating predictable patterns around the building's architecture. Visibility was excellent despite the smoke, and the late morning sun would provide optimal lighting conditions. "Sergeant Martinez, what's your current range to this building?" "Approximately 1,850 meters. Why do you ask?" Rebecca closed her eyes, visualizing the ballistics calculations she'd memorized during her competitive shooting days. "Sergeant, I may have a solution, but I need to know your current weapon system and ammunition specifications." There was a pause on the radio. "Dr. Sterling, what exactly are you proposing?" "I'm proposing that if you can provide covering fire and coordinate with incident command, I might be able to establish a communication system that could guide rescue operations more effectively than current protocols allow." But even as she spoke, Rebecca could feel the tremor in her left hand getting worse. The stress of the situation, combined with the adrenaline flooding her system, was amplifying the essential tremor that had already cost her one career. How could she possibly help coordinate precision operations when she couldn't even hold a coffee cup steady? The answer would have to wait. Right now she needed to focus on getting these people to safety, one problem at a time. The emergency stairwell resembled a war zone. Rebecca led the group of survivors through twisted metal and shattered concrete, her engineering background helping her identify the safest path through the destruction. Emergency lighting flickered sporadically, casting eerie shadows on cracked walls that groaned ominously with each step they descended. "Stay close and watch for falling debris," Rebecca called back to the group. "If I say drop, you drop immediately." Dr. Fleming was helping General Blackwell, who was limping severely from his leg injury. Victoria Ashford had recovered from her initial shock and was now assisting Mrs. Catherine Hayes, an elderly board observer who had been visiting from the Pentagon's Weapons Procurement Division. The wounded security guard, Detective Ryan Walsh from Blackstone's corporate security, insisted on bringing up the rear despite the blood seeping through his uniform shirt. "How many floors to ground level?" gasped one of the junior executives. A young man named Peterson who looked like he'd never climbed more than 2 flights of stairs in his corporate life. 12 floors, Rebecca replied, checking her phone for the building schematics she'd accessed during her original security consultation work. "About 240 steps if the stairwells remain clear." Peterson looked like he might collapse. "I don't think I can make it." "Focus on 10 steps at a time," Rebecca advised. "That's all you need to think about. 10 steps, then 10 more." As they descended, Rebecca tried to maintain radio contact with Sergeant Martinez, but the signal was becoming increasingly unreliable. The building's communication infrastructure was clearly damaged, and interference from whatever had caused the explosions was disrupting electronic systems throughout the facility. At the 10th floor landing, they encountered their first major obstacle. A section of the stairwell had collapsed, leaving a gap of approximately 12 feet between their position and the continuation of the stairs below. Worse, Rebecca could see that the remaining structure was unstable, with twisted rebar protruding from both sides of the gap. "Can we jump it?" asked Detective Walsh. Though his injury made it clear he wouldn't be attempting any athletic maneuvers, Rebecca studied the gap, noting the unstable debris and the fact that Mrs. Hayes was in her 70s. "Too dangerous. Even if some of us could make it, we'd be leaving people behind." "There has to be another way down," Fleming said, consulting the emergency evacuation map posted on the damaged wall. Rebecca studied the building schematic, her technical mind automatically calculating alternatives. "The service elevator shaft runs parallel to this stairwell. If we can access it, there should be maintenance ladders." "The elevators are down," Walsh pointed out. "We don't need the elevator car," Rebecca replied, moving to the service door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." "Just the shaft." The door was locked, but the explosion damage had warped the frame enough that Rebecca and Walsh could force it open together. Beyond was the elevator shaft, dark and echoing with the sounds of the building's structural distress. Rebecca shone her phone's flashlight into the depths, revealing maintenance ladders running down the shaft's walls. 12 floors to go," she announced. "Everyone stays together, and nobody looks down." Mrs. Hayes peered into the shaft nervously. "My dear, I'm not sure I can manage a ladder climb at my age." Rebecca knelt beside the elderly woman, recognizing the steel in her eyes despite her concern. "Mrs. Hayes, in about 10 minutes, this building is going to start collapsing from the bottom up. Our only chance of survival is reaching ground level and getting clear of the structure. Can you climb?" Mrs. Hayes' expression hardened with determination. "Young lady, I've been evaluating military equipment for 30 years. I think I can manage 12 floors of a ladder if it means exposing the people responsible for this attack." As they began the grueling descent through the elevator shaft, Dr. Fleming moved closer to Rebecca during one of their brief rest stops. "There's something else you need to know about the weapons testing conspiracy," he said quietly. Rebecca paused on the ladder, looking up at the elderly scientist. "What do you mean?" Fleming's voice was barely audible above the sound of groaning metal from the building's damaged structure. "The falsified test data isn't just about accuracy problems. We've been covering up catastrophic failure rates in combat conditions." "What kind of failures?" "Barrel ruptures, firing pin malfunctions, scope mounting failures that occur specifically during extended operations," Fleming continued. "The weapons perform adequately during short-term testing, but they're failing in the field after prolonged use. Snipers are losing their primary weapons during critical missions." Rebecca felt her blood chill. A sniper's rifle was more than just equipment. It was a lifeline in hostile territory. If weapons were failing during actual combat operations, it meant American soldiers were being left defenseless in enemy territory. "How Widespread is this problem. Every major defense contractor is involved, Fleming whispered. Remington, Barrett, Knight's Armament, even some of the smaller precision rifle manufacturers. They've been coordinating to hide the failure rates, because addressing the problems would cost billions in recalls and redesigns. At the 7th floor, Rebecca's phone finally regained signal strength. She immediately called Captain Thompson. "Back, Rebecca, where are you?" Thompson's voice was tight with concern. "We're showing multiple emergency frequencies reporting casualties inside the building." "Service elevator shaft, descending to ground level," Rebecca replied. "David, I need you to listen carefully. The attack on this building isn't random. Dr. Fleming has evidence of a massive weapons testing conspiracy that could affect every precision rifle system in military inventory." "What kind of conspiracy?" "Falsified test data covering up failure rates that are getting soldiers killed in combat," Rebecca said as she continued climbing down the maintenance ladder. "Someone attacked this building to prevent that evidence from reaching federal investigators." Thompson's silence stretched for several seconds. "Rebecca, if what you're saying is true, this goes beyond corporate fraud. This is a national security issue. It gets worse," Rebecca continued, her voice echoing in the elevator shaft. "The people behind this conspiracy know that Dr. Fleming has evidence. They're not going to stop bombing the building. They'll keep trying to eliminate witnesses." At the 4th floor, they encountered their second major obstacle. The elevator shaft was flooded with water from broken fire suppression lines, creating a lake of contaminated water that extended down into the darkness below. The water level appeared to be at least 3 feet deep, and electrical cables were sparking ominously in the murky liquid. "We can't go through that," Detective Walsh observed. "Even if the water isn't electrified, we don't know what chemicals or debris are mixed in." Rebecca studied their options, noting the service access panels that led to the building's mechanical floors. "There." She pointed to a heavy steel door marked Mechanical Level 3. "We can exit the shaft here and find another route down." The mechanical floor was a maze of pipes, ducts, and electrical systems that normally kept the Blackstone building operational. Now, with power fluctuating and water dripping from damaged systems, it resembled the interior of a damaged submarine. Rebecca led the group through the narrow passages between massive air conditioning units and electrical panels, following the building's structural layout toward the emergency exits. "Dr. Fleming," she said as they navigated the mechanical maze, "who else knows about the evidence you're carrying?" Fleming adjusted his grip on the briefcase chained to his wrist. "Too many people. Justice Department investigators, FBI weapons specialists, Congressional Oversight Committee staff. But someone with access to that information has been feeding details to the defense contractors." "You're saying there's a mole in the federal government?" "I'm saying that within 2 hours of briefing FBI investigators about our findings, this building came under attack," Fleming replied grimly. "Either that's the most remarkable coincidence in history, or someone is working very hard to make sure this evidence never sees the inside of a courtroom." They emerged from the mechanical floor onto the second-level parking garage, where Rebecca's phone rang with an incoming call from an unknown number. Against her better judgment, she answered. "Dr. Sterling," came a cultured voice she didn't recognize. "You've wandered into something far beyond your understanding." Rebecca felt a chill of recognition. This was the voice of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. Who is this? Someone who would prefer that Dr. Fleming's evidence never reaches federal investigators. "We're prepared to make you a very generous offer for your cooperation." "Let me guess," Rebecca replied, her voice hardening. "Money in exchange for looking the other way while soldiers die from defective weapons." "Dr. Sterling, you're a weapons analyst who stumbled into a situation involving national security considerations that supersede individual concerns. Walk away now, and you'll be compensated handsomely for your discretion." Continue interfering, and you'll discover that today's events were merely a warning. Rebecca looked at the survivors clustered around her in the parking garage, then at Dr. Fleming clutching his briefcase full of evidence that could save soldiers' lives. "Here's my counter-offer," she said coldly. "You and whoever you're working for can go straight to hell." She ended the call and turned to the group. "We need to get out of this building immediately. They're not done trying to kill us." As they moved toward the parking garage exit, Rebecca's military training was already analyzing their tactical situation. The building was compromised, they had injured civilians to protect, and an unknown number of hostile operatives who were willing to use explosives to silence witnesses. But they also had evidence that could expose a conspiracy reaching into the highest levels of the defense industry. Her left hand was still trembling, the essential tremor amplified by stress and adrenaline. But her right hand remained steady, and her mind was clear. She'd spent years studying ballistics, trajectory analysis, and precision shooting fundamentals. If someone wanted to silence them, they'd have to get through a weapons expert who understood exactly how to fight back. The real question was whether her tremor would matter when precision became a matter of life and death. Detective Walsh was monitoring police frequencies on his radio when he suddenly looked up with alarm. "We've got company," he announced. "Multiple units of unknown personnel approaching the building perimeter, armed and moving with military precision." Through the parking garage's exit, Rebecca could see black SUVs positioning themselves around the building's entrances. Men in tactical gear were deploying from the vehicles, and their movement pattern suggested professional military training rather than standard law enforcement. "Those aren't federal agents," Fleming observed quietly. "No," Rebecca agreed, studying the tactical deployment through the garage's security cameras. "Those are the people who bombed this building, and they're here to finish what they started." Mrs. Hayes, despite her age and the trauma of the building collapse, spoke with the authority of someone who'd spent decades evaluating military threats. "Dr. Sterling, that evidence Dr. Fleming is carrying represents more than corporate fraud. If these weapons failures are as widespread as he suggests, we're looking at a systematic compromise of American military capabilities." Rebecca nodded, understanding the full scope of what they were facing. "How many soldiers are currently deployed with weapons that could fail during critical operations?" "Thousands," Fleming replied. "Special operations teams, designated marksmen, counter-sniper units. Every precision shooter in the military could be carrying equipment that might malfunction when they need it most." The implications were staggering. American forces around the world were relying on weapons that had been deliberately misrepresented by their manufacturers. Enemy forces who understood these vulnerabilities could exploit them, turning American soldiers' equipment against them. "We have to get that evidence to federal investigators," Rebecca said firmly, "whatever it takes." But as she watched the tactical teams surrounding the building, Rebecca realized that their opponents had significant resources and weren't hesitant to use lethal force. The battle for Dr. Fleming's evidence was about to become very personal and very dangerous. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Building surrounded. Surrender Dr. Fleming and his briefcase, and the rest of you walk away alive." Rebecca showed the message to the group, then deleted it without responding. Some offers weren't worth dignifying with a reply. "There's a service tunnel that connects to the adjacent building," Detective Walsh said, studying the parking garage's layout. "It's primarily used for utilities, but it might give us an alternate exit route." "How do you know about it?" Rebecca asked. Walsh smiled grimly. "Corporate security means knowing every way in and out of a facility, including the ways that aren't on the official blueprints." As they prepared to move deeper into the building's hidden infrastructure, Rebecca realized that her knowledge of weapons and ballistics was about to be tested in ways that no amount of laboratory analysis could have prepared her for. The conspiracy they'd uncovered was worth killing for, and the people behind it had the resources to do exactly that. The service tunnel beneath Blackstone Defense stretched into darkness like the throat of some mechanical beast. Rebecca led the survivors to the narrow concrete passage, following utility pipes and electrical conduits that connected the main building to the adjacent research facility. The air was thick with dust and the acrid smell of burned electronics, while overhead fluorescent fixtures flickered sporadically, casting dancing shadows on the tunnel walls. Detective Walsh had been right about the tunnel's existence, but he'd underestimated its condition. Years of deferred maintenance had left sections of the concrete cracked and crumbling, while leaked chemicals from various building systems had created pools of contaminated water that they had to carefully navigate around. "How much further?" whispered Peterson, the junior executive who was struggling to keep pace despite his obvious fear. "About 200 meters, Walsh replied, consulting a maintenance diagram on his phone. "The tunnel exits into the basement of the Blackstone Research Annex." Dr. Fleming, despite his age and injuries, was keeping up with the group while maintaining his death grip on the briefcase containing the weapons testing evidence. "Rebecca," he said quietly as they moved through a section where the tunnel widened slightly, "there's something else about this conspiracy that I haven't told you." Rebecca paused, allowing the group to rest briefly while she checked her phone for any signal. Still nothing. The underground location was blocking all communication with the outside world. "What do you mean?" Fleming's expression was grim. In the flickering light, "The weapons failures aren't accidental. Someone has been deliberately engineering defects that only manifest under specific combat conditions." The implications hit Rebecca like a physical blow. "You're saying this isn't just corporate negligence? Someone is intentionally sabotaging American military equipment. The failure patterns are too precise, too targeted," Fleming explained. "Barrel stress fractures that occur, specifically after 500 rounds of sustained fire. Scope mounting systems that loosen during prolonged exposure to desert heat. Firing pin assemblies that jam after exposure to specific humidity levels found in jungle environments." Mrs. Hayes, despite her age, grasped the strategic implications immediately. "Foreign intelligence services," she said with the certainty of someone who'd spent decades analyzing threats to American military capabilities. "Someone has been feeding our enemies detailed information about how to compromise our weapon systems." Rebecca felt her stomach turn as she processed the full scope of what they'd uncovered. American soldiers weren't just carrying defective weapons, they were carrying weapons that had been deliberately sabotaged by hostile intelligence services working through corrupted defense contractors. "How long has this been going on?" she asked. "At least 5 years, Fleming replied. "Maybe longer. The earliest suspicious failure reports in my files date back to 2019, but the patterns have been getting more sophisticated over time." A sudden sound from behind them made everyone freeze. Footsteps echoed through the tunnel, accompanied by the distinctive sound of tactical equipment, the soft clink of metal gear, and the whisper of modern military clothing moving against concrete walls. "They found the tunnel," Walsh whispered, his hand moving instinctively toward his service weapon. Rebecca counted the approaching footsteps, her mind automatically analyzing the tactical situation. At least 4 individuals, moving with practiced stealth, but not quite silently enough to avoid detection in the echoing tunnel environment. Professional soldiers, but not elite special operations, the kind of military contractors who were skilled, but not necessarily the best available. "Can we outrun them to the exit?" Victoria Ashford asked, though her voice carried little hope. Rebecca studied the tunnel ahead, calculating distances and movement rates. With Mrs. Hayes and the injured General Blackwell slowing their progress, they wouldn't reach the research annex before their pursuers caught up. And the tunnel offered no cover, no alternate routes, and no defensive positions. "No," she said. "Simply, we need to find a way to delay them." Detective Walsh was already moving toward a junction where utility pipes branched off toward different building systems. There, he pointed to a heavy steel valve wheel. Main water line for the sprinkler systems. If we can flood this section of the tunnel, ... Rebecca understood immediately. It won't stop them, but it might slow them down long enough for us to reach the exit. She and Walsh worked together to turn the valve wheel, their combined strength. Barely sufficient to overcome years of corrosion and mineral buildup. With a screech of protesting metal, the valve finally gave way, and water began pouring into the tunnel behind them at a rate that would create significant flooding within minutes. "Move," Rebecca ordered, and the group began advancing toward the tunnel exit as quickly as their injured members could manage. Behind them, the sound of rushing water was followed by surprised shouts and the splash of tactical boots in rising flood water. Rebecca allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Their pursuers would have to wade through increasingly deep water while carrying heavy equipment, which would significantly slow their advance. The tunnel exit was a heavy steel door marked with radiation warnings and biohazard symbols, reminders that the research annex dealt with more exotic materials than the main building. Walsh produced a key card from the security equipment and swiped it through the electronic lock. The door clicked open, revealing a modern basement facility filled with testing equipment and secured storage areas. "Where are we exactly?" Rebecca asked as they emerged into the research facility. "Ballistics testing lab," Mrs. Hayes replied, recognizing the equipment immediately. "This is where Blackstone conducts live-fire testing of experimental weapon systems." Rebecca's eyes widened as she took in the surroundings. Racks of precision rifles lined the walls, ranging from standard military-issue weapons to exotic prototypes that she'd only seen in classified technical manuals. Ammunition storage lockers contained every caliber from standard .308 Winchester to experimental rounds designed for extreme long-range shooting. But more importantly, she could see the testing facility's outdoor range through reinforced windows. Multiple firing positions were set up for ranges extending out to 2,500 meters, with computerized target systems and environmental monitoring equipment that would make any precision shooter envious. "Dr. Fleming," she said urgently, "are any of these weapons clean? Not compromised by the conspiracy?" Fleming moved to a secure locker and input a combination. "These are pre-production prototypes," he said, retrieving a custom-built rifle that made Rebecca's pulse quicken. "Modified Remington 700 in .338 Lapua Magnum. This particular weapon was built for testing our counter-sabotage modifications." Rebecca took the rifle, immediately recognizing the quality of its construction. Custom barrel, precision machined action, and a Schmidt and Bender scope that cost more than most people's cars. The weapon felt perfectly balanced in her hands, though she noticed her left hand trembling slightly as she gripped the forestock. "Rebecca," Fleming said quietly, "this weapon is zeroed for extreme long-range work. We use it to test ballistic performance at distances exceeding 2,000 meters. Before Rebecca could respond, her phone suddenly regained signal as they moved closer to the building's exterior walls. It immediately began buzzing with missed calls and text messages. She answered. A call from Captain Thompson. "Rebecca, thank God. Where are you?" "Research facility adjacent to the main building," she replied. "We've got evidence of weapons sabotage that goes beyond corporate fraud. Foreign intelligence services have been deliberately compromising American military equipment." Thompson's silence stretched for several seconds. "Rebecca, I've been monitoring federal communication channels. There are reports of a terrorist attack on the Blackstone facility, but the federal response seems limited." "What do you mean limited?" "I mean, there should be dozens of federal agencies swarming that location, but the actual response has been minimal. Either the government doesn't understand the scope of what's happening, or someone is actively preventing an appropriate response," Rebecca finished. The implications were chilling. The conspiracy might extend into federal law enforcement agencies themselves. Through the testing facility's windows, Rebecca could see the tactical teams that had surrounded the main building were now advancing toward the research annex. Their movement pattern suggested they knew exactly where the survivors had gone, which meant either they'd tracked the group through the tunnel or they had detailed knowledge of the facility's layout. "They're coming," Detective Walsh announced, monitoring the external security cameras. 6 vehicles, approximately 24 armed personnel. "They'll have this building surrounded in less than 3 minutes." Mrs. Hayes moved to a secured communication terminal and began entering access codes. "I'm going to try to contact the Pentagon directly," she said, "if we can get federal attention focused on this situation." Her efforts were interrupted by the sound of explosions from the main building. Through the windows, Rebecca could see new sections of the Blackstone headquarters collapsing in controlled demolitions. Someone was systematically destroying the facility to eliminate any evidence of the weapons testing conspiracy. "They're not just trying to kill us," Fleming observed with growing horror. "They're erasing the entire facility." Rebecca's phone rang again, this time showing the same blocked number that had called earlier. "Dr. Sterling," came the cultured voice, "you continue to underestimate the resources arrayed against you. Look out your window." Rebecca moved to the exterior windows and felt her blood freeze. On the ridgeline where Sergeant Martinez had been positioned, she could see the distinctive muzzle flash of a precision rifle firing. But the target wasn't the tactical team surrounding the building, it was the police counter-sniper position itself. "Martinez!" She called into her phone, switching to the tactical frequency. No response. "The federal law enforcement personnel who might have assisted you are no longer a factor," the voice continued. "Dr. Fleming's evidence will never reach investigators, and anyone who has seen that evidence will not survive to testify about it." Rebecca watched in horror as additional muzzle flashes lit up positions around the facility perimeter. The enemy wasn't just attacking the building. They were systematically eliminating any law enforcement or military personnel who might interfere with their operation. "You have 2 minutes to surrender Dr. Fleming and his briefcase," the voice continued. "After that, we will demonstrate the effectiveness of our weapons testing in a very direct manner." Rebecca ended the call and turned to the group of survivors. "They've eliminated the counter-sniper team and any federal backup. We're on our own." General Blackwell, despite his injuries, spoke with the authority of someone who'd commanded soldiers. "In combat, Dr. Sterling, what are our tactical options?" Rebecca studied the testing facility around them, her mind racing through possibilities. They had access to precision weapons, ammunition, and a facility designed for long-range shooting. The enemy had superior numbers and positioned themselves for a siege, but they were operating on the assumption that the people trapped inside were helpless corporate executives. They were about to discover their mistake. "Dr. Fleming," Rebecca said, moving toward the weapons racks, "how many of these rifles are functional and properly zeroed?" "All of them," Fleming replied. "This is an active testing facility." Rebecca selected a second rifle, a custom Zo-10 platform in .308 Winchester, and began checking its mechanical condition. Despite the tremor in her left hand, her right hand was steady as she worked the action and verified the scope settings. "Mrs. Hayes, can you operate the computerized target systems?" "I helped design them," the elderly woman replied with grim satisfaction. Rebecca looked out at the tactical teams positioning themselves around the building, calculating ranges and environmental factors with the precision that had once made her a competitive shooter. The wind was steady from the northwest, visibility was excellent, and she had access to weapons that were significantly superior to anything the attacking force was carrying. "Detective Walsh, how many exit routes does this building have?" "3 primary exits, plus the tunnel we came through. But they'll have all of them covered." Rebecca smiled for the first time since the crisis began. They're covering the exits because they think we're trying to escape. What if we're not? What do you mean? Fleming asked. Rebecca chambered around in the custom Remington 700, the mechanical precision of the action calming her nerves despite the adrenaline flooding her system. I mean, they made a mistake bringing a siege to a ballistics testing facility. They have superior numbers, but we have superior position, superior weapons, and something they don't expect. Which is? Rebecca moved to the firing position that offered the best view of the enemy's deployment. At 800 meters, the lead tactical team was well within the effective range of the weapon she was holding. Her left hand trembled slightly as she settled into a shooting position, but her right hand, her trigger hand, was rock steady. A sniper. Rebecca settled into the precision shooting position with the fluid grace of someone who had performed this ritual thousands of times. The custom Remington 700 felt like an extension of her body as she adjusted the bipod legs and positioned herself behind the Schmidt and Bender scope. Through the ballistics testing facility's reinforced windows, she had a clear view of the tactical teams deploying around the research annex. Her left hand trembled slightly as she gripped the rifle's forestock, but her right hand, the one that mattered, was rock steady on the pistol grip. Years of competitive shooting had taught her to work with the essential tremor rather than fight against it. The key was understanding which parts of her body needed to be stable and which could accommodate the slight movement. Range to the lead. Element? She asked Mrs. Hayes, who was already operating the computerized targeting system. 827 meters, Mrs. Hayes replied, reading from the laser rangefinder display. Wind northwest at 6 miles per hour, temperature 72 degrees, humidity 43%. Rebecca made minute adjustments to her scope's elevation and windage turrets, her mind automatically calculating the ballistic trajectory for the .33 Lapua Magnum ammunition. The environmental conditions were nearly perfect for long-range precision. Shooting minimal wind, excellent visibility, and stable atmospheric pressure. Dr. Sterling, General Blackwell said quietly, "Are you certain about this course of action? Once you fire that weapon, this becomes a military engagement." Rebecca looked through her scope at the tactical team leader who was coordinating the assault on their position. Through the high magnification optics, she could see his face clearly, a professional soldier, carrying weapons that were designed to kill her and everyone in this building. General, with respect, this became a military engagement the moment they bombed the Blackstone building to cover up weapons sabotage that's getting American soldiers killed overseas. Rebecca replied, "I'm just evening the odds." Dr. Fleming activated an internal communication system that connected to speakers throughout the research facility. "Attention approaching personnel," his voice echoed across the compound. "You are engaging a facility containing classified weapons testing. Data protected under federal law. Cease your advance and withdraw immediately." The response was immediate and unambiguous. Automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple positions, bullets striking the reinforced windows and sending spider web cracks across the ballistic glass. The tactical teams weren't interested in negotiation. "So much for diplomacy, Detective," Walsh observed, taking cover behind a concrete barrier. Rebecca breathed slowly, allowing her heart rate to stabilize despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. The techniques she'd learned at the Army Marksmanship Unit were second nature now. Controlled breathing, natural point of aim, trigger control that made the shot a surprise even to herself. Through her scope, she could see the tactical team leader speaking into a radio while gesturing toward the building. He was approximately 800 meters away, standing behind what he probably thought was adequate cover next to one of the black SUVs. Rebecca's crosshairs settled on the center mass of her target. The tremor in her left hand was present, but manageable, not affecting the rifle's stability. thanks to the precision bipod and her years of training in shooting techniques that accommodated her condition. "First shot," she whispered, engaging the safety and taking up the trigger slack. The rifle fired with a sharp crack that echoed through the testing facility. Through her scope, Rebecca watched the .338 Lapua Magnum bullet cover the distance to target in just over 1 second. The tactical team leader's body armor absorbed the impact, but the kinetic energy was sufficient to knock him backward and out of the fight. "Target down," Mrs. Hayes reported from the computerized observation system. Confirmed hit at 827 meters. The effect on the attacking force was immediate and dramatic. The coordinated advance stopped as the tactical teams scrambled for better cover, their confidence shaken by the realization that someone in the building was capable of precision long-range fire. "Outstanding shot," General Blackwell said with professional appreciation. "But they're not going to give you another opportunity like that." Rebecca was already adjusting her position, moving to a different firing port as the enemy forces adapted to the new threat. "They don't understand what they're dealing with," she said, chambering another round. "These aren't corporate executives hiding in a conference room. This is a ballistics testing facility with someone who knows how to use it." Dr. Fleming activated the facility's advanced target acquisition system, which immediately began tracking the positions and movement patterns of every individual within a 2-kilometer radius. "Rebecca, I'm feeding tactical data to your scope's heads-up display. Range, wind, and target identification for every hostile contact." Rebecca's scope display suddenly filled with targeting information that would have been science fiction just a few years earlier. Digital overlays showed precise range to target, wind compensation values, and even predictive tracking for moving targets. The Blackstone Research Facility wasn't just equipped for weapons testing, it was equipped for next-generation warfare. "This is military technology that doesn't officially exist," Mrs. Hayes explained. "Experimental targeting systems designed for special operations snipers." A new voice crackled over Rebecca's phone as Captain Thompson managed to re-establish communication. "Rebecca, I've been monitoring radio chatter. The tactical teams attacking your position are reporting casualties and requesting backup. Someone thinks you're a trained military sniper team." "Good," Rebecca replied, acquiring her second target through the advanced optics. "Let them think that." The second target was a sniper who had positioned himself on a rooftop approximately 1,200 meters away, believing his distance provided safety from anyone inside the research facility. Through her scope, Rebecca could see him adjusting his own rifle's position, probably preparing to provide covering fire for the advancing tactical teams. Rebecca made elevation adjustments for the increased range, accounting for the bullet's trajectory over the extended distance. At 1,200 meters, environmental factors became much more critical when speed, temperature gradients, even the Earth's rotation had to be considered for a precision shot. Wind speed increased to 8 miles per hour, Mrs. Hayes reported. Atmospheric pressure stable. Rebecca's left hand trembled as she gripped the rifle, but she'd learned long ago that the slight movement was irrelevant as long as her trigger finger remained steady. The key to precision shooting wasn't eliminating all movement, it was controlling the movement that mattered. She fired her second shot, watching through the scope as the bullet traced its arc through the air. At 1,200 meters, the flight time was nearly 2 seconds, long enough for Rebecca to observe the projectile's impact as it struck the enemy sniper's rifle, destroying his weapon and sending him scrambling for cover. "Confirmed hit at 1,200 meters, Mrs. Hayes announced. Enemy sniper neutralized." The attacking force's radio chatter was becoming increasingly frantic as they realized they were facing a precision shooter capable of engaging targets at ranges that exceeded their own capabilities. Several of the tactical teams began withdrawing to more distant positions, while others tried to coordinate a flanking maneuver that would bring them closer to the building. "They're adapting," Detective Walsh observed, monitoring the external security cameras. 3 teams moving to approach from the north side, where the terrain provides better cover. Rebecca was already shifting to the testing facility's northern firing positions, where she had clear lines of sight across a broad valley that stretched for over 2 kilometers. The approaching teams would have to cross open ground where her precision rifles would have significant advantages over their shorter-range weapons. "Dr. Fleming," she said while settling into her new shooting position, "activate the automated target designation system for the North Valley." Fleming worked at a control console that managed the facility's most advanced testing equipment, activating LiDAR mapping and thermal tracking. "You now have real-time positioning data for any human-sized targets within 2,500 meters. Rebecca's scope display became a tactical commander's dream: precise locations for every enemy combatant, predicted movement patterns, and optimal firing solutions calculated automatically by the facility's computer systems. But the most important element was still the human factor, her ability to make precise shots under combat pressure. The lead element of the flanking force emerged from the tree line at 1,800 meters, moving in a tactical formation that suggested professional military training. They were good, but they were operating under the assumption that the people in the building were helpless civilians, rather than someone with access to experimental weapons systems. Rebecca's third shot covered the 1,800-meter distance in just under 3 seconds, striking the lead tactical operator's equipment pack and destroying his radio communications gear. The psychological effect was devastating. The attacking force now understood they were facing someone capable of precision shots at extreme range. "Incredible," General Blackwell said, watching the tactical situation develop through the facility's monitoring systems. "You're conducting precision counter-sniper operations at ranges that would challenge even special operations marksmen." Rebecca chambered another round, her movements smooth and practiced despite the stress of combat. "General, I spent 3 years training for situations I hoped would never happen. Today I found out if I was paying attention." The tremor in her left hand was still present, but it had become irrelevant to her shooting performance. Years of working with the essential tremor had taught her shooting techniques that actually made her more accurate than many shooters without any physical challenges. The slight movement forced her to focus more intently on breathing, trigger, control, and follow through dot. Her phone buzzed with an incoming call from the blocked number that had been threatening them earlier. "Dr. Sterling," came the cultured voice, "you're demonstrating capabilities that exceed our intelligence estimates. Perhaps we underestimated your background. Perhaps you should have done better research before attacking a ballistics testing facility," Rebecca replied, maintaining her shooting position while talking. "We know about your tremor," the voice continued. "Essential tremor that ended your competitive shooting career. How exactly are you managing precision shots at extreme range with a neurological condition that affects your hand stability?" Rebecca smiled grimly as she acquired another target through her scope. "Because you clearly don't understand the difference between a disability and a limitation. My left hand shakes. My trigger finger doesn't." She fired her 4th shot, this one at a target attempting to set up a heavy weapons position at 2,100 meters. The shot struck the weapon itself, rendering it inoperable and sending the tactical team scrambling for different equipment. "Confirmed hit at 2,100 meters, Mrs. Hayes reported with undisguised admiration. "Dr. Sterling, that's approaching world record territory for precision shooting." The attacking force was now in complete disarray. Radio intercepts suggested they were calling for backup and requesting specialized equipment to deal with what they believed was a highly trained military sniper team. None of them had considered that their opposition might be a single weapons analyst with access to experimental targeting systems. "They're requesting aerial support," Detective Walsh reported, monitoring emergency services frequencies. Helicopter gunships en route from an unknown location. Rebecca looked up from her scope, considering their tactical situation. She demonstrated her shooting capabilities and bought them time, but the enemy was escalating their response. Soon, they'd be facing military aircraft rather than ground-based tactical teams. "Dr. Fleming," she said, "is there anything in this facility that can deal with helicopters?" Fleming's expression was grim as he consulted the facility's weapons inventory. "Nothing that's been tested or approved for operational use." "What about untested and unapproved?" Fleming hesitated, then moved to a secured locker marked with multiple warning labels. Experimental anti-materiel rifle. 50 caliber with experimental ammunition designed to penetrate aircraft armor. Rebecca studied the massive weapon Fleming revealed. It was easily twice the size of the rifle she'd been using, designed for engaging vehicles and aircraft rather than personnel. The scope was unlike anything she'd seen before, incorporating computer-assisted targeting that could track and engage moving aerial targets. "Has anyone ever fired this weapon?" "Only computer simulations," Fleming admitted. "The recoil forces are at the upper limit of what human physiology can withstand." Rebecca looked out at the valley where the tactical teams were regrouping at extreme range, then at the approaching helicopters visible on the horizon. Her left hand was trembling, her right hand was steady, and she had access to weapons that existed nowhere else in the world. "Well," she said, moving toward the experimental anti-materiel rifle, "I guess it's time to find out what the upper limits actually are." The experimental anti-materiel rifle was a beast of engineering that pushed the boundaries of what could be called a handheld weapon. Rebecca studied the massive .50 caliber system, noting the advanced recoil mitigation technology and computer-assisted targeting systems that transformed it from an impossibly powerful rifle into something approaching science fiction. "Weight 47 pounds, Dr. Fleming read from the technical specifications. "Muzzle velocity 3,400 feet per second with experimental tungsten core ammunition, designed to penetrate aircraft armor at ranges exceeding 3,000 meters. Rebecca ran her hands along the weapon's precision machined components, her engineer's mind automatically analyzing the mechanical systems. Despite the intimidating size, the rifle's design actually addressed many of the challenges that made extreme long-range shooting difficult. Advanced stabilization systems would help compensate for her essential tremor, while the computer targeting would handle complex ballistic calculations. Estimated recoil force equivalent to being kicked by a horse," Fleming continued. "The computer model suggests it's at the absolute limit of human tolerance." "Computer models don't account for motivation," Rebecca replied, settling behind the massive rifle and adjusting its position on the reinforced shooting bench. Through the scope, she could see the approaching helicopters more clearly, now 2 military-spec aircraft armed with door guns and missile systems. Mrs. Hayes activated the facility's most advanced tracking systems, filling Rebecca's scope display with targeting data that seemed pulled from a military science fiction movie. "Dr. Sterling, you now have predictive tracking for aerial targets, including flight path analysis and optimal intercept calculations." Rebecca's phone rang with a call from Captain Thompson. "Rebecca, I've been monitoring military frequencies. Those aren't standard law enforcement helicopters approaching your position. Intelligence suggests they're privately owned aircraft equipped with military-grade weapon systems." "How privately owned?" Rebecca asked, maintaining her position behind the anti-materiel rifle. "Corporate military contractors," Thompson replied grimly. "The kind of mercenary operations that officially don't exist, but somehow have access to equipment that rivals anything in the military inventory." Before Rebecca could respond, her phone buzzed with another call from an unknown number. This time, the voice was different, younger, with a slight accent that suggested Eastern European origins. "Dr. Sterling, this is Colonel Viktor Kozlov." formerly of Russian Special Forces, currently employed by interests that prefer Dr. Fleming's evidence to remain buried. I understand you've been causing difficulties for my tactical teams. Rebecca felt a chill of recognition. Kozlov was a name she'd heard in intelligence briefings. During her military service, a Russian operative who specialized in weapons technology theft and had been linked to several incidents involving compromised American military equipment. Let me guess, Rebecca replied. You're the one who's been engineering the weapons failures that are getting American soldiers killed. I prefer to think of it as quality control testing, Kozlov said with casual menace. Your weapons manufacturers produce equipment based on theoretical specifications. I test those specifications under actual combat conditions. The failures you've discovered are simply ... education. The implications hit Rebecca like a physical blow. The weapons sabotage wasn't just corporate fraud or foreign intelligence gathering. It was active battlefield testing using American soldiers as unwilling test subjects. You've been deliberately sending defective weapons to combat zones to study failure patterns, she said, her voice hardening with anger. Dr. Sterling, warfare is about information advantage. Understanding the limitations of enemy equipment provides strategic benefits that justify certain ... costs. Through her scope, Rebecca could see the lead helicopter approaching at approximately 2,800 meters, well within the theoretical range of the experimental rifle, but at the extreme limit of any shot she'd ever attempted. The aircraft was moving at roughly 120 miles per hour, making target tracking and ballistic prediction extraordinarily complex. Colonel Kozlov, Rebecca said, chambering one of the experimental tungsten core rounds. Here's some information for you. Americans don't make good test subjects. She ended the call and focused on the targeting system's displays. The computer was tracking the helicopter's flight pattern and calculating intercept solutions that accounted for the aircraft's speed, the projectile's flight time, and environmental factors that would affect accuracy at extreme range. Dr. Fleming, she said, what's the maximum effective range this weapon has been designed for? Theoretical maximum is 3,500 meters against stationary targets, Fleming replied. Against moving aerial targets, the computer model suggests 2,800 to 3,000 meters under optimal conditions. Rebecca watched the helicopter's approach, noting its flight pattern and the fact that the pilot was maintaining a predictable course. Military pilots were trained to vary their approach patterns to avoid exactly this kind of engagement, but these mercenary pilots were apparently overconfident in their aircraft's defensive capabilities. Mrs. Hayes, wind conditions? Northwest. At 4 miles per hour, steady. Temperature 74 degrees, humidity 41%. Atmospheric pressure is stable. The targeting computer was painting solution data on Rebecca's scope display, showing the precise aiming point needed to intercept the helicopter's flight path. The shot would require leading the target by nearly 50 meters and compensating for bullet drop that exceeded 30 feet over the extended range. Rebecca's left hand trembled as she gripped the rifle's forestock, but the weapon's advanced stabilization systems automatically compensated for small movements. Her right hand remained steady on the pistol grip, finger positioned precisely on the trigger's first stage. First shot on aerial target, she whispered, engaging the safety and beginning her breathing sequence. The rifle fired with a thunderous crack that shook the entire testing facility. Rebecca felt the recoil slam into her shoulder with enough force to knock most people unconscious, but the weapon's recoil mitigation systems distributed the energy across her entire body. Through her scope, she watched the tungsten core projectile trace its arc through the air over a flight time of nearly 4 seconds. The round struck the helicopter's tail, rotor assembly with devastating effect. The aircraft immediately went into an uncontrolled spin as the pilot fought to auto-rotate to an emergency landing. Rebecca watched through her scope as the helicopter crashed into an open field approximately 1 kilometer away, sending up a column of black smoke. "Confirmed hit at 2,800 meters," Mrs. Hayes announced with undisguised amazement. "Dr. Sterling, that may be the longest successful anti-aircraft shot in modern military history." The second helicopter immediately changed course, abandoning its direct approach in favor of a more cautious reconnaissance pattern that kept it at extreme range. The pilot had clearly witnessed his partner's fate and wasn't eager to test Rebecca's marksmanship again. Rebecca's phone rang with another call from Captain Thompson. "Rebecca, whatever you just did got attention at the highest levels. I'm being contacted by Pentagon officials who want to know how a civilian weapons analyst just shot down a military helicopter with a single round. Tell them it was a good day for American engineering," Rebecca replied, chambering another experimental round. "Rebecca, I'm also getting reports of federal response teams finally moving toward your location. Looks like an FBI hostage rescue team, plus military special operations units. Someone finally understood the scope of what you're dealing with." Through the facility's external cameras, Rebecca could see the distant tactical teams that had been besieging their position were now withdrawing toward vehicles and evacuation points. The combination of her precision shooting demonstration and the approaching federal response had apparently convinced them that continuing the attack was no longer tactically viable. But Rebecca knew the real threat wasn't the mercenary teams, it was the international conspiracy they represented. Kozlov and his employers had been systematically compromising American military capabilities for years, and they weren't going to abandon their operation because of one-day setbacks. Dr. Fleming activated a secure communication system that connected directly to federal law enforcement agencies. "This is Dr. Marcus Fleming, Blackstone Defense Senior Engineer. I have evidence of systematic weapons sabotage affecting American military forces worldwide. We need immediate federal protection and a secure location to transfer classified information." The response came within minutes, not from FBI agents, but from a voice that carried the unmistakable authority of high-level military command. "Dr. Fleming, this is General Patricia Morrison, Joint Chiefs of Staff. We've been monitoring the situation at your facility through military intelligence channels. A federal tactical team is en route to your location, but we need to understand the scope of the evidence you've acquired." Mrs. Hayes took the communication, her Pentagon credentials providing immediate credibility. "General Morrison, this is Catherine Hayes, Weapons Procurement Oversight. The evidence Dr. Fleming possesses indicates systematic sabotage of precision rifle systems affecting every major weapons manufacturer. American snipers and designated marksmen are carrying equipment that has been deliberately compromised by foreign intelligence services." The silence that followed stretched for nearly 30 seconds before General Morrison responded. "Mrs. Hayes, if what you're suggesting is accurate, we're looking at a national security crisis that affects every precision shooter in the American military." "General, it's worse than that," Fleming interjected. "The sabotage patterns suggest coordinated intelligence gathering designed to map the exact limitations of our weapon systems. Enemy forces now know precisely how to exploit American equipment failures under specific combat conditions." Rebecca was monitoring the approaching federal response through the facility's tracking systems when she noticed something that made her blood chill. The helicopters approaching from the east bore federal markings, but their flight patterns and equipment configurations didn't match standard FBI or military aircraft. "General Morrison," Rebecca interrupted, "what's the identification code for the federal helicopters en route to our position?" "Federal response is ground-based only," Morrison replied immediately. "We have no aircraft authorized for your location due to the weapons testing that's been reported." Rebecca felt her stomach drop as she realized they were about to face another Wave of attacks disguised as federal rescue operations. Dr. Fleming, activate the facility's defensive systems. Those aren't federal aircraft approaching. Through her scope, Rebecca could see the details of the approaching helicopters clearly now. Military hardware, professional crews, but subtle. Differences in equipment configuration that suggested foreign manufacture or modification. These were Kozlov's backup forces, arriving under the cover of federal identification. How many aircraft? Detective Walsh asked, monitoring the tracking displays. 4 helicopters, approximate crew of 6 each, Mrs. Hayes reported. All showing false federal identification codes. Rebecca moved back to the experimental anti-materiel rifle, checking her ammunition supply and noting that she had only 3 of the specialized tungsten core rounds remaining. Against 4 aircraft with professional crews, she would need to make every shot count at ranges that pushed the absolute limits of what was physically possible. Dr. Fleming, she said, settling back into the shooting position, are there any other experimental weapons in this facility that might be relevant to our situation? Fleming activated a classified inventory system that Rebecca had never seen before. There's one more prototype that might be applicable, he said grimly. Experimental smart ammunition designed for extreme long-range anti-aircraft work. Smart ammunition? Projectiles with integrated guidance systems that can adjust their trajectory in flight, Fleming explained. They're designed to engage aerial targets at ranges exceeding 4,000 meters, but they've never been tested outside of computer simulations. Rebecca looked at the approaching aircraft, calculating ranges and engagement timelines. The experimental smart ammunition might give her the capability to engage multiple targets at extreme range, but using untested ammunition in combat conditions was extraordinarily risky. Her left hand trembled as she considered the options, but her right hand remained steady. She'd already demonstrated capabilities that most people would consider impossible. Perhaps it was time to find out what actually impossible looked like. Load the smart ammunition, she said. Let's see what this rifle can really do. The experimental smart ammunition looked like something from a science fiction arsenal. Each round was nearly twice the size of conventional .50 caliber projectiles, with miniaturized guidance systems and control surfaces that could adjust the bullet's trajectory during flight. Dr. Fleming handled them with the reverence reserved for technology that could reshape modern warfare. Each projectile contains gyroscopic stabilizers, GPS guidance, and target recognition software, Fleming explained as he loaded the first smart round into the anti-materiel rifle's chamber. Once fired, the ammunition can track moving targets and compensate for environmental factors that would normally make extreme long-range shots impossible. Rebecca studied the rifle's modified scope display, which now showed targeting interfaces unlike anything in conventional military arsenals. The smart ammunition could engage targets at distances exceeding 4,000 meters ranges, where traditional ballistics became virtually impossible due to atmospheric interference, target movement, and the Earth's rotation. Dr. Fleming, Mrs. Hayes, called from the tracking station. I'm reading 4 aircraft approaching from multiple vectors. They're using federal identification codes, but their flight patterns suggest coordinated attack formations rather than rescue operations. Through the facility's advanced surveillance systems, Rebecca could see the approaching helicopters clearly. Professional military aircraft with crews that moved with the precision of special operations forces, but subtle equipment modifications that revealed their true nature as foreign intelligence assets operating under false flags. Range to lead aircraft? Rebecca asked, settling behind the experimental rifle. 3,800 meters in closing, Mrs. Hayes reported. Wind conditions remain stable, but you're now shooting at distances where atmospheric density variations become significant factors. Rebecca's phone buzzed with another call from Colonel Kozlov. Dr. Sterling, you continue to demonstrate capabilities that exceed our intelligence assessments. Perhaps it's time to discuss terms for your recruitment rather than your elimination. Not interested, Rebecca replied, adjusting the rifle's targeting systems to interface with the Smart Ammunition's guidance packages. Dr. Sterling, you're currently facing 4 aircraft with highly trained crews, using experimental ammunition that has never been combat tested, while suffering from a neurological condition that affects your shooting stability. The odds against success are mathematically impossible. Rebecca smiled grimly as she acquired the lead aircraft through her scope. Colonel, you clearly don't understand the difference between mathematically impossible and physically impossible. My hands shake, but my resolve doesn't. The Smart Ammunition's targeting system painted the lead helicopter with a laser designation that would guide the projectile to its target. Unlike conventional bullets that followed simple ballistic trajectories, these rounds could actually maneuver during flight to compensate for target movement and environmental factors. First shot with Smart Ammunition, Rebecca announced. Engaging the experimental targeting system, the rifle fired with the same thunderous report as before, but this time, Rebecca could track the projectile's flight through the scope's telemetry display. The Smart round covered the initial trajectory like a conventional bullet, then began making minute course corrections as its guidance system analyzed the target's movement pattern. The tungsten core projectile struck the lead helicopter's engine compartment with devastating precision, causing an explosion that lit up the evening sky. The aircraft spiraled toward the ground in a ball of flame and smoke, eliminating the first threat at a range that would have been impossible with conventional ammunition. Confirmed kill at 3,800 meters, Mrs. Hayes announced with undisguised amazement. Dr. Sterling, you just engaged a moving aerial target at a range that exceeds every known record for precision shooting. The remaining 3 helicopters immediately dispersed, abandoning their coordinated approach in favor of individual attack patterns that made them more difficult to track and engage. The pilots had clearly witnessed their leader's fate and understood. They were facing weapons technology that surpassed anything in their experience. Rebecca chambered a second Smart round, but the targeting system was struggling to acquire locks on the rapidly maneuvering aircraft. The helicopter pilots were good, using terrain features and evasive flight patterns that tested the limits of even the experimental ammunition's guidance capabilities. They're adapting, Detective Walsh observed, monitoring the aircraft through external cameras. Professional pilots using advanced evasive tactics. Rebecca's phone rang with a call from General Morrison. Dr. Sterling, we've been monitoring your engagement through satellite surveillance. What you're accomplishing should be impossible with any known weapons technology. General, Dr. Fleming's experimental systems are significantly more advanced than anything in the standard military inventory, Rebecca replied while tracking one of the evasive helicopters through her scope. The question is whether we can eliminate this threat before they call an additional backup. Dr. Sterling, this facility contains technology that represents years of classified research into next-generation weapons systems. We cannot allow that technology to fall into foreign hands. Before Rebecca could respond, proximity alarms began sounding throughout the facility. Mrs. Hayes checked the surveillance displays with a growing alarm. We have ground forces approaching from multiple directions. Looks like special operations teams moving with military precision. Through the facility's cameras, Rebecca could see tactical teams advancing across the valley, using professional small unit tactics that suggested elite military training. These weren't the mercenary contractors they'd faced earlier. These were foreign special operations forces equipped with advanced weapons and equipment. Dr. Fleming, Rebecca said urgently, how many people know about the Smart Ammunition technology? Fleming's expression was grim as he consulted classified databases. Too many. Pentagon officials, defense contractors, congressional oversight committees. But someone with access to that information has been providing detailed intelligence to foreign adversaries. The second helicopter was approaching from the northeast, using a ridge line to mask its approach until the last possible moment. The pilot was excellent, varying altitude and speed to complicate any targeting solution. But the Smart Ammunition's guidance system was learning from each engagement, improving its ability to track and intercept evasive targets. Rebecca fired her second Smart round at a range of 4,200 meters, pushing the experimental system to its absolute limits. The projectile's flight time was nearly 6 seconds, during which the helicopter pilot attempted multiple evasive maneuvers. But the Smart Ammunition adjusted its trajectory continuously, finally striking the aircraft's rotor assembly and sending it crashing into the valley below. 2 down, Mrs. Hayes reported. But the ground teams are closing fast. Rebecca was already repositioning to engage the third helicopter when her phone rang with yet another call from Kozlov. Dr. Sterling, you're demonstrating capabilities that suggest access to classified American weapons technology. My employers are now more interested in acquiring that technology than in eliminating the evidence Dr. Fleming possesses. Your employers are about to be disappointed, Rebecca replied, acquiring the third aircraft through her targeting system. Dr. Sterling, you're currently outnumbered 50 to 1 by professional soldiers who are willing to die to obtain the weapons technology you're using. Even with experimental ammunition, you cannot engage that many targets. Rebecca looked at the tactical display showing the advancing ground forces, then at the 2 remaining helicopters that were maintaining extreme distance while coordinating the ground assault. Kozlov was right about the numbers, but he was wrong about her options. Dr. Fleming, she said, are there any other experimental systems in this facility that might level the playing field? Fleming activated a final classified inventory that revealed the ballistics testing facility's most secret capabilities. Automated defense systems, he said quietly. Computer-controlled weapons platforms designed to protect classified research facilities. Why didn't you mention this earlier? Because activating them requires authorization from the Joint Chiefs of Staff and commits us to a level of warfare that officially doesn't exist. Rebecca watched the ground forces advancing across multiple approach routes while the remaining helicopters provided coordination and fire support. The experimental Smart Ammunition had proven its effectiveness, but she only had 1 round remaining, and the tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. Her phone rang with a call from General Morrison. Dr. Sterling, satellite surveillance indicates you're facing overwhelming odds. We're authorizing activation of the facility's defensive systems under emergency protocols. What kind of defensive systems? Rebecca asked. Classified, Morrison replied. But Dr. Fleming has the activation codes. Fleming moved to a heavily secured control panel that Rebecca had never seen before. Automated precision weapon systems designed to engage multiple targets simultaneously, he explained. Computer-controlled rifles with targeting capabilities that exceed human limitations. Essentially, robotic snipers? Essentially, yes. But Dr. Sterling, once we activate these systems, this facility becomes a declared military installation under attack by foreign forces. There's no going back to civilian status. Rebecca looked at Mrs. Hayes, who nodded grimly. Dr. Sterling, the evidence I've reviewed suggests this conspiracy affects thousands of American service members worldwide. If we don't stop it here, the body count will continue rising. The third helicopter was maneuvering for an attack run while the ground forces closed to within 800 meters of the facility. Rebecca had approximately 2 minutes before the tactical situation became untenable, regardless of what weapon systems were available. Activate the defensive systems, she ordered. Fleming entered a series of codes that immediately transformed the ballistics testing facility from a research installation into something resembling a military fortress. Automated weapons platforms emerged from concealed positions throughout the complex, each equipped with precision rifles and targeting systems that operated with mechanical perfection. Automated defense systems online, Fleming announced. Computer targeting has acquired 47 hostile contacts within engagement range. Rebecca watched through her scope as the robotic weapons platforms began engaging the advancing ground. Forces with precision that exceeded human capabilities. Each shot was perfectly calculated for range, wind, and target movement, resulting in a level of accuracy that forced the attacking forces to seek cover or retreat. But the remaining helicopters were adapting, using their mobility and weapon systems to target the automated defense platforms. Rebecca realized she still had a critical role to play. The experimental smart ammunition could engage the aerial threats at ranges the automated systems couldn't match. "Final smart round," she announced, chambering the last experimental projectile. Fourth helicopter was maintaining position at nearly 4,500 meters, using its extreme range to coordinate the ground assault while remaining beyond the reach of conventional weapons. The pilot was clearly experienced with asymmetric warfare, understanding that controlling the tactical situation was more important than direct engagement. Rebecca's targeting system painted the distant aircraft with laser designation, but the range was at the absolute limit of what even the smart ammunition could achieve. Environmental factors at such extreme distances created variables that pushed the guidance system beyond its design parameters. Her left hand trembled as she settled into the shooting position, but her right hand remained steady on the trigger. This would be the most challenging shot of her life. A moving target at impossible range, using experimental technology under combat conditions. "Dr. Sterling," came General Morrison's voice over the facility's communication system. "You're attempting a shot at a range that exceeds every known record for precision shooting. Are you certain this is achievable?" Rebecca studied the ballistic computer's calculations, noting the multiple variables that could affect accuracy at such extreme range. Wind speed, atmospheric pressure, temperature gradients, target movement, projectile guidance limitations. Any one of these factors could cause a miss at 4,500 meters. "General," she replied, 3 hours ago these people were laughing at my shaking hands. Sometimes you have to attempt the impossible to prove what's actually possible." She fired the final smart round, watching through her scope as the projectile began its journey toward a target that existed at the very edge of the possible. The smart ammunition's flight time to the target at 4,500 meters was an agonizing 7 seconds. Through her scope, Rebecca watched the projectile's telemetry data stream across her display as the experimental round navigated atmospheric conditions that would have made conventional shooting impossible. Wind shear at different altitudes, temperature gradients that affected air density, and the subtle but measurable effects of the Earth's rotation all factored into the guidance system's calculations. The tungsten core projectile struck the helicopter's main rotor hub with devastating precision, causing a catastrophic failure that sent the aircraft spinning toward the ground in an uncontrolled descent. The explosion when it hit the valley floor was visible even at the extreme range, marking the end of the aerial threat that had seemed untouchable just moments before. "Confirmed kill at 4,500 meters, Mrs. Hayes announced, her voice filled with professional awe. "Dr. Sterling, you've just accomplished what every ballistics expert would consider physically impossible." The psychological effect on the attacking ground forces was immediate and decisive. Radio intercepts showed panic spreading through the tactical teams as they realized their air support had been eliminated by shooting that exceeded the theoretical limits of human capability. The automated defense systems were systematically engaging targets across the facility's perimeter, but it was the impossible long-range shots that broke the enemy's morale. Rebecca's phone rang with a call from Colonel Kozlov, but this time his cultured voice carried a note of genuine respect mixed with disbelief. "Dr. Sterling, my tactical advisors inform me that what you've just accomplished violates several laws of physics. How exactly does someone with essential tremor achieve precision shooting at ranges that challenge the finest marksmen in the world. Rebecca remained in her shooting position, scanning for additional targets through the experimental rifle's scope. "Colonel, you made the same mistake everyone else makes. You assumed a disability means inability. My condition forced me to develop shooting techniques that are actually superior to conventional methods. Explain." Rebecca smiled as she adjusted her scope settings, noting that the automated defense systems had successfully repelled the ground. "Assault. Essential tremor affects my left hand, not my trigger finger. Learning to shoot with a slight movement in my support hand forced me to focus more intensely on breathing, natural point of aim, and follow-through. Most shooters develop bad habits because they can rely on muscle memory. I had to develop perfect technique because anything less would fail." The silence on the radio stretched for nearly 30 seconds before Kozlov responded. "Dr. Sterling, you're suggesting that your neurological condition actually made you a better marksman. I'm suggesting that limitations force innovation. When you can't rely on perfect steadiness, you learn to work with movement instead of fighting it. When you can't muscle through a shot, you have to understand the science behind it." Through the facility's surveillance systems, Rebecca could see the surviving members of the assault teams withdrawing toward distant extraction points. The combination of her impossible shooting demonstration and the automated defense systems had convinced them that continuing the attack was tactically impossible. Dr. Fleming activated the facility's external communication systems, broadcasting on all emergency frequencies. "Attention all personnel. This is Dr. Marcus Fleming at Blackstone Defense Research. The facility is secure, hostile forces have been repelled, and we have evidence of international weapons sabotage that requires immediate federal investigation." The response came within minutes from General Morrison. "Dr. Fleming, federal tactical teams are moving to secure your location. Dr. Sterling, your shooting performance has been observed through satellite surveillance by senior Pentagon officials. We need to discuss the implications of the weapons technology you've demonstrated." Rebecca finally allowed herself to relax slightly, though she maintained her position behind the experimental rifle. Generally, the technology Dr. Fleming developed here represents years of classified research. The real question is how foreign intelligence services obtain detailed information about American weapons systems in the first place. Dr. Sterling, that investigation is now being handled at the highest levels of government. What we need to understand is how you achieved shooting performance that exceeds every known human capability. Mrs. Hayes activated a secure data link that transmitted the facility's complete engagement records to Pentagon analysts. "General Morrison, the ballistics data shows shot placement accuracy at ranges that challenge our understanding of human limitations combined with current technology." Before General Morrison could respond, Rebecca's phone rang with another call from the blocked number she'd been receiving throughout the crisis. But this time, the voice was different, older, with an American accent that carried unmistakable authority. "Dr. Sterling, this is Deputy Director Harrison, Central Intelligence Agency. Colonel Kozlov and his operation have been under surveillance for several months as part of a larger investigation into foreign intelligence penetration of American defense contractors." Rebecca felt a moment of confusion as the implications became clear. "You're saying this entire attack was part of a CIA operation?" "I'm saying that Dr. Fleming's evidence was deliberately leaked to foreign operatives to draw them into a situation where we could identify and eliminate their entire network. What we didn't anticipate was your involvement or your remarkable shooting capabilities." Dr. Fleming looked stunned as he processed this revelation. "My research, the weapons failures, the conspiracy, were all real," Harrison confirmed. "But we've been using that information as bait to identify every foreign agent and corrupted defense contractor involved in the sabotage network. Today's attack allowed us to eliminate a significant portion of the threat, while demonstrating the effectiveness of experimental weapons systems. Rebecca studied the tactical situation around the facility, noting that genuine federal response teams were now arriving from multiple directions. Professional law enforcement and military units with proper identification and coordination that contrasted sharply with the foreign operatives who had attacked earlier. "Deputy Director Harrison," she said, "what happens to the evidence Dr. Fleming has been protecting? That evidence will be used to prosecute the American citizens who collaborated with foreign intelligence services to compromise military equipment. The international operatives you engaged today were the foreign end of a conspiracy that reaches into several major defense contractors and at least 3 congressional offices." Mrs. Hayes activated additional communication systems as FBI tactical teams established a secure perimeter around the research facility. "Dr. Sterling, the Pentagon is requesting a full debrief on the experimental weapons systems you employed. Your shooting performance has implications that extend far beyond this incident." As Rebecca finally stepped away from the experimental rifle, she allowed herself to process the magnitude of what had occurred. In less than 12 hours, she'd gone from being a dismissed weapons analyst to demonstrating shooting capabilities that redefined the possible. Her essential tremor, which had ended her competitive shooting career, had actually enabled her to achieve precision that exceeded every known human record. "Detective," Walsh approached with a tablet displaying federal arrest warrants. "Dr. Sterling, the conspiracy you helped expose has resulted in arrests at 6 major defense contractors, 4 congressional offices, and approximately 30 foreign intelligence operatives. The weapons sabotage network has been completely dismantled." "General." Morrison's voice came over the facility's communication system with an announcement that would change Rebecca's life permanently. "Dr. Sterling, based on your demonstrated capabilities and the classified nature of the technology you've employed, the Pentagon is offering you a position with the Army Marksmanship Unit's Advanced Weapons Development Program." Rebecca looked around the ballistics testing facility where she'd spent the most intense day of her life. The experimental weapons, the advanced targeting systems, and the opportunity to prevent other soldiers from dying due to equipment failures created by foreign sabotage. "General, what exactly would that position involve?" "Training the next generation of precision marksmen using the techniques you've developed, testing experimental weapon systems, and serving as a subject matter expert on long-range shooting. Capabilities that exceed current military doctrine." Rebecca's phone buzzed with a final call from Colonel Kozlov. "Dr. Sterling, my employers have authorized me to make you a substantial offer for information about the experimental weapons technology you demonstrated today." "Colonel," Rebecca replied with finality, "some things aren't for sale. Especially to people who use American soldiers as test subjects for weapons sabotage." She ended the call and turned to Dr. Fleming, who was preparing to transfer his evidence to federal investigators. "Dr. Fleming, how many soldiers will be affected by exposing this conspiracy?" "Every precision marksman in the American military," Fleming replied. "Thousands of service members who will now receive weapons they can actually trust instead of equipment that's been deliberately compromised." As federal investigators began securing the research facility and its experimental weapon systems, Rebecca realized that her trembling hands had become irrelevant to her shooting performance. The advanced stabilization systems and smart ammunition had demonstrated that human limitations could be overcome through technology and superior technique. Mrs. Hayes approached with a final tablet displaying casualty reports from overseas military operations. "Dr. Sterling, preliminary analysis suggests that the weapons failures you helped expose have contributed to mission failures and American casualties in at least 12 different combat zones over the past 5 years." Rebecca felt the weight of those statistics, understanding that her shooting demonstration had been about much more than proving her capabilities. Every shot she'd made had been striking back against a conspiracy that had cost American lives. Through deliberately compromised equipment, General Morrison arrived at the facility within 2 hours, accompanied by senior Pentagon officials and weapons development specialists who wanted to understand how Rebecca had achieved impossible shooting performance. The debrief session revealed techniques and capabilities that would reshape military marksmanship training for years to come. Dr. Sterling, General Morrison said as the evening sun set over the Rocky Mountains, "When you arrived at work this morning, you were a weapons analyst whose colleagues dismissed your technical recommendations. Tonight, you've demonstrated shooting capabilities that exceed every known human record and helped expose an international conspiracy that threatened American military effectiveness." Rebecca looked out at the valley where the wreckage of 4 helicopters marked the sites of her impossible shots. Her left hand still trembled slightly, but she'd proven that some limitations could become advantages when approached with the right techniques and technology. "General, this morning they laughed when I said our weapons had accuracy problems. Tonight, I proved that accuracy problems can be solved if you're willing to push the limits of what's possible." As Rebecca prepared to begin her new career developing advanced marksmanship techniques for the military, she reflected on the day's events. Her essential tremor hadn't disappeared, but it had become irrelevant. The executives who had dismissed her recommendations would now be reading about her shooting performance in classified Pentagon reports. Sometimes the people who laugh at your limitations are the ones who understand them least. And sometimes proving them wrong requires pushing beyond what anyone thought was possible. The experimental weapon systems that had enabled her impossible shots would now be developed for military use, protecting soldiers who deserved equipment they could trust. The conspiracy that had deliberately sabotaged American weapons was exposed and dismantled, preventing future casualties caused by compromised equipment. Rebecca Sterling had started the day as a dismissed analyst with shaking hands. She ended it as the marksman who had redefined the possible, proving that expertise combined with determination could overcome any limitation. In the distance, the lights of Denver sparkled like stars, and somewhere in the darkness, American soldiers would soon receive weapons they could actually trust. It had been a good day for precision shooting. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.